Hello, I'm Danielle. I direct Common Justice, a demonstration project of the Vera Institute of Justice, and I'm a Stoneleigh Fellow. Common Justice is a victim service and alternative to incarceration program based in restorative justice practices for serious and violent felonies. We bring together the people who commit crimes, the people harmed by those crimes, and their support people who may be family, friends, neighbors, mentors, loved ones, in a dialogue process in which we reach agreements about what the responsible person can do to make things as right as possible. If the responsible person fulfills those agreements, it replaces what would otherwise be a lengthy prison term, and then we work with the harmed party, the victim, over the course of at least the next year to support them in their healing and in their lives generally. Trauma theory teaches us that in order to move through harm, it can be enormously useful for victims to develop a coherent narrative about what happened, meaning they really understand what happened to them and why, to have their questions about it answered, to develop a sense of control relative to the incident, to be able to participate in what happens as a result. And all too often those things aren't available to victims in a standard court process. Courts are not designed as venues for healing. It took me understanding how often the criminal justice system, as we know it, fails victims to really become deeply committed to alternatives to incarceration. And I think it was only when I really understood that for many victims, not only did the punishment of the person who hurt them fail to accomplish or bring about their healing, but very often it ran counter to what their needs were in terms of their safety and their well-being. So the agreements that come out of the dialogues include many of the things that you would expect. So they include restitution, community service, letters of apology to the person or the family, commitments to attend educational programs, vocational programs, mental health services. They also include things you might not expect. So in one case, the defendants and the victim together made a movie about their experience in common justice. In one case, the victim and the defendant met each other's children because, as the victim said, I want you to see the children whose father you almost took away, and I believe in the father you can be to your daughter, and I want to see her to her face and tell her that. The number of agreements that include people who seek ongoing contact and ongoing connection has been really striking for us because it underlines what is one of the fundamental principles of common justice, which is that the interests of victims and defendants are not inherently opposed, and that in fact they can support each other in moving forward in their lives in a better way. In the United States, restorative justice practices have been applied primarily to lower-level misdemeanor cases. Internationally, that's not the case. And if you look at the research internationally, very consistently what you find is that the greatest impact, meaning the best outcomes in terms of recidivism, the mental health of victims, and the satisfaction of all parties, accompany the projects that work with the most serious crimes. And that makes sense because these are processes that bring you face to face with the human impact of what you've done. And it makes sense that when that impact is greater, so too is the response. So Stoneleigh was entirely essential to me being able to get this project off the ground. Having faith in the vision for this work when it was still just an idea was incredibly important. It's cutting edge work, it's a new idea, it's a risk to be engaged with, and their commitment to that from the beginning made it possible in the first place. I think the other thing that the fellowship allows is really space for me to think strategically, not only about the project on the ground and the details of running it, but about the implications of this work for broader criminal justice policy and the ways the things that we're learning in Brooklyn could really inflect the national conversation about how we think about crime, punishment, and healing.